Hey guys, Thrasher here. It's August, and that means it's time for a new tier list. Let's talk about it right now. Okay, so first up, before I talk about the tier list itself, I do want to mention that there is a news announcement where they say that the actual update, where you need to have backed up your data before the update happens, will be on the 5th. So make sure you've backed up your data to Twitter, to Facebook, wherever you want to do it. I do have another video on that, so go check that out if you haven't yet. Make sure you have it done. So without any further ado, let's jump into the tier list itself. Okay, first up is the D tier. These are the units that you won't be using. There's no real reason to use them. They are on deck for balance changes whenever we do get our next set of balance changes. It will most likely come from units in this D tier. And if you look at all of my previous tier list, almost every single time we get a balance change, every single unit except for maybe one will come from the D tier of my tier list in the previous month. Every now and then we'll get like one unit from the C tier, but it's normally all D tier units. And another thing to mention here before we go any further is as you look at these units, keep in mind that they are not in order within the tier. So the D tier, all those units are arbitrarily placed. The same is true of the C tier, the B tier, the A tier, the S and the S plus tier. The only place where units are actually placed in order within the tier will be the Z tier. So with that being said, let's move into the C tier. These are units that don't see much play. There are very rare occasions where you will use 1 to 2 of these units, but most of them also pretty much belong in the same situation as the D tier, where they need balance changes before they're actually going to get used again, but they're not really on deck for balance changes yet. One good example of this is Chi-Chi. She is a female warrior. She's an okay female warrior unit. She has a big buff against Sun Family, which is still a very viable meta PvP team, but she doesn't really get used because female warriors themselves have fallen off quite a bit, and out of the female warriors there are normally better options. Plus, her damage output is not where it needs to be unless you're specifically against Sun Family. So let's move into the B tier. These are units that are just below middle of the road. You generally don't use them unless you're in a pinch where you say have 4 to 5 units in a team and you just need a filler or two. B tier units can be okay in specific niche situations like that, but you won't run them generally in most teams. The problem with most of these units are their stat lines, so they do need a character balance change. Although some of these units do have fairly good kits and can run on decent teams, they just get outshined by many other units in the game. So let's move on to the A tier. A tier units are your straight up middle of the road units. They're your general filler units if you're missing a spot and you don't have a Z tier or S plus tier unit to use in whatever team you're looking at. Great units at this point to talk about in that specific situation are the Super Saiyan 3 Gokus. You'll notice both of them are in the A tier at this point. The purple one specifically still has very quality Z ability and bench uses, and you could use him if you were running some type of weird Saiyan team where for whatever reason you don't have Super Vegeto or some other amazing purple unit. You could run him, but there are many other better options, which is why he sits at the A tier. Let's move into the top tiers, S first. S tier units are generally quality units. They just don't have quite the impact of an S plus tier unit or a Z tier unit. Many units in the S tier are staples on high value meta PvP viable teams. A good example of that is the yellow Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks. Now he has dropped from S plus tier down to S tier, and that's because he did get a nerf. Although it wasn't technically a nerf, it was actually a bug fix. Before, his main ability would bring an Ultimate Arts card out that he could use on the opponent, and if you had 3 of your characters that were all alive, you used Gotenks' ultimate, it would always faint 100% of the time. It got nerfed or fixed down to 70%, and now he's not quite as impactful, although he's still a very powerful unit, and that's still a very powerful ultimate. So one other major thing to note here is we also have the blue future Super Saiyan Trunks of the adult version that has actually moved up from the A tier to the S tier, and that's because there have been so many future units that have been released in the last couple banners that actually make him viable, or at least his team in general viable, so he is a runnable character once again. So let's move into the S plus tier. So this is the tier where you're going to see most of the most recent characters that have been added to the game. These are very, very good characters, but not quite meta-breaking characters or meta-changing characters. They just help supplement teams and possibly move teams that were sort of middle tier into the upper tiers, not necessarily changing whatever the top tier team is at the time. Good examples of this are androids 13 and 14, who have taken the android team and made it very viable again. Obviously, there are a few other characters that are extremely powerful. Now you have some actual options there, and that team can be run in PvP with great success. Another good example of that are the Transforming Future Gohan and the new Tank Goku Black. They've given the Future Team a lot of other options. There were very quality Future Team characters before, but only 1 to 2 of them were really top tier characters, and now that you have a few extra options, that team is truly PvP meta viable again. So those type of units are exactly what you're looking for when you're trying to fill out your team. Now, with that being said, these are all quality units, but they're not the units that you build your team around. Those are your Z tier units. So let's move into the Z tier. All of these units will be ordered from number 7 all the way up to number 1. These units have very obvious impacts in the meta and have very obvious power differences from 7 to 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's talk about them right now. Number 7 first. Super Saiyan Blue Goku. He's a very durable unit that can heal himself. He also gets damage reduction when the fight starts for about 45 counts. As the fight goes on, he gets stronger, he gets increases to his ki recovery and his damage. He also sits on 2 of the most powerful teams in the PvP meta right now with God Ki and Sun Family, neither of which is probably the top team at the moment, but both are in the top 5. And he can pull an Ultimate Arts card, which allows you to do a ton of damage to one specific opponent, nuke him down, and continue the fight. So he can be a very powerful offensive and defensive tool in most situations. Let's move on to number 6. Teen Future Transforming Super Saiyan Trunks. Now that is a mouthful, but this is an absolutely fantastic unit. He has great damage potential. He can be an excellent support unit once he transforms. When he transforms, he gets health back, and every time he enters the battlefield, he gets a damage increase. When he leaves the battlefield, he increases the damage of all Vegeta family members, all Super Saiyans, and all Hybrid Saiyans. Now, he has to be transformed for that to happen, but you can transform him fairly quickly. Also beyond that, once he's transformed, his main ability allows you to destroy all of your cards and get 4 new cards, which means you can complete a full combo, use your main ability, get 4 new cards, and at the very least, use another card, start another combo, or have a few options to play around with for your other characters depending on their kits. So he is an absolutely phenomenal unit. He is helping the future team come back into prominence, and as we look at another future card that we'll see here in just a few moments, I think it's making that team very, very PvP viable. So let's look at number 5. Golden Frieza. This character actually got a huge buff with the new Extreme Ginyu Force event that popped up. It is buffing all Frieza Force characters. He's obviously a Frieza Force character. You can run him on that team. For the first 60 timer counts, he has a huge damage buff. He has the ability to increase the damage of the opponent every time he enters the battlefield. He reduces his Blast Arts cost, which is excellent for ki management and his ability to elongate combos when he's in situations where he may not have maximum ki or possibly doesn't have maximum cards. Beyond that, his main ability allows him to draw an Ultimate Arts card that does a ton of damage, and it gives him ki back, so you can actually put it at the very end of a combo when you're pretty much running out of ki, and that allows you to elongate it even further. And in most cases, that combo where you've used all of your cards, then you use your main ability, and you use that ultimate ability, will finish whatever opponent you started with unless they switch out, which still is great because then you can sort of spread out the damage and make sure that you're getting most of their characters close to low to no health whatsoever. So he is a phenomenal unit. He is very useful with the Ginyu Force team, and he's also useful if you just try to run other Frieza Force characters. So let's move on to number 4. Super Saiyan Gogeta from the Broly movie. He has an excellent stat line, he can do a ton of damage, he is the second most important unit on what is considered the top PvP team at the moment, Fusions. He does a ton of damage with his Stardust Fall, and you can use it multiple times, which is absolutely fantastic. And he heals when he uses his main ability, which is very good for the durability of the character. He also has Blast Armor, which allows you to push through anyone that's blast-based, which is an excellent complement to the other Fusions character, because if they're not using Blast Arts cards, they're using Strike Arts cards, and that other character has an excellent way to counter that, and we'll get to that when we get to that character. So let's move on to number 3. Perfect Cell, an absolutely phenomenal unit that had fallen off a little bit in the past few tier lists because he didn't have an amazing team at the time, but now he is the centerpiece to the Android team as well as the Future team, which both have amazing characters. He's really come back into prominence. He heals over time, whether he is out in combat or on the bench, making him super tanky. He has a -5 reduction to the cost of his Blast Arts cards, which allows him to elongate his combos as well as do in general more damage over the course of a fight. He has an ultimate move that can do a ton of damage. When he comes into combat, he locks one of the opponent's cards so they can't use it, which can be very frustrating and can give you a pretty massive advantage in lots of different situations. And last but definitely not least, he has a cover rescue. So if your opponent is trying to Rising Rush one of your characters or trying to use their ultimate card on one of your characters, you can use Cell, switch him into cover rescue, and completely negate whatever that attack is. So let's move on to number 2. Father-Son Kamehameha Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. He is still probably the best anchor unit in the game. He has an absolutely ridiculous damage potential. He has an Ultimate Arts card that can delete most opponents. If you have a Goku on your team who is dead, it will absolutely delete most opponents. And then beyond that, he can heal when he uses his main ability, and it gives him a ton of keyback and draws that Ultimate Arts card that I talked about, so you can elongate that combo, make sure you finish whatever opponent you're looking at the time. Beyond that, he is fairly defensive, a tanky unit that actually has cover damage reduction when you switch him in. Also, every time he uses a Blast Arts card, he has a stacking ability that increases his Blast Arts damage for a reasonable period of time, allowing you to delete most opponents if you happen to have 4 Blast Arts cards. As I said before, he's an absolutely monstrous tank that gets a huge increase to his damage and his key recovery every time you lose an opponent, and that stacks. So he can absolutely delete opponents if he is the last person on your team. He is one of the very few characters in the game where you may have killed 2 of your opponent's characters, still have all 3 of yours, and if he only has the Gohan, you still need to be very careful not to get 3v1 wiped. But even with that being said, there is a better character in the game right now. Let's look at number 1. To no one's surprise, number 1 is still Super Vegeto. There are very good other characters in the game, but this is the best character on what is currently the best team in the PvP meta. He has so many buffs, it's absolutely insane. Let's name off just a couple. Every time your opponent uses a card, he's going to get some type of a buff. His main ability heals him, increases his damage, and gives him his Ultimate Arts card, which is a legendary finish. Using his Spirit Sword can absolutely delete most opponents, and it looks amazing if you finish your last opponent with it. Beyond that, his green card is absolutely phenomenal, and that you can use it to give himself an active damage reduction, which is fairly rare in this game, being able to actively reduce your damage taken without actually doing a cover change. But then let's actually talk about the cover change itself. If your opponent is attacking one of your characters that is not Super Vegeto, you're in a combo, and then they try to use a Strike Arts card during that combo, if you cover change in this Super Vegeto, he will stop the combo dead in its tracks and knock the opponent back. That's absolutely phenomenal, especially when you combo that with the other important character on the Fusion team, the Super Gogeta that we talked about before, who has blast armor, so he can go through any opponent that's using lots of blast cards. If you then run into an opponent that's using lots of strike cards, this Super Vegeto himself becomes extremely powerful, even further beyond what we were just talking about. Beyond that, he gets huge buffs every time he draws a card. If he draws a Strike Arts card, he gets Strike Arts damage. If he draws a Blast Arts card, he gets Blast Arts damage. If he draws a green card, he gets key recovery. This is an absolutely insane unit when it comes to buffs. Beyond that, he does an excellent job of currently stopping his major counter, who is Perfect Cell, a yellow type unit that obviously has type advantage over him, but he has a massive 30% damage increase over regeneration units, which that Cell is, which allows him to pretty much take care of that Cell without much of an issue, but he obviously doesn't really want to get hit by him. Beyond all of that, this unit actually gets some of the best Z ability buffs in the game from his support unit, the base form Vegeto, who is actually free to play, which means when you factor everything together, you look at the entire situation of the meta, everything in this toolkit of this character, he has to be the best character in the game right now. That's pretty much it for this video. If you guys think I missed anything, throw it down below. If you disagree with anything, let me hear that too. And if you guys like this content, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.